new things happen and I think about them. And just try to figure out what I feel about them and what they mean or don't mean. And that, just sort of naturally infects the work, I guess.
Are there any new things that you're thinking about recently, or that
no,
you've
it's mostly
become
just porn. It's like
porn will be perennially the thing.
I think, yeah, because it's really new things that happened when I was between the ages of 13 and 17. Yeah, I mean, the new book I'm writing is sort of about finance, and it's sort of about social media, and it's about a relationship, marriage. I'm getting married, so that's a new thing to think about, so, on the personal and global, I'm constantly thinking about all those things. And I think definitely about, this question of identity in the world of social media. Stuff like that is just seems pretty fascinating. One sort of idea I had with Flatscreen initially, which, who knows if it sort of comes across in the book. I don't think anyone has ever mentioned it to me. But I did sort of have this idea that I wanted to write a book about a kid who learned everything he knows from TV and the internet, and who actually, knows quite a lot of things. I mean, he's lacking in certain areas, and he's very deficient in his understanding of human relationships, I think. In part because he sort of has very poor models. He grew up with very poor models for that, and then the other models he has are from pop culture, and they're totally false. But, I wanted to get across the fact that you can actually just, learn an incredible amount if you spend 8 hours a day watching television. There's so much there. And you can learn a lot of incorrect things, too, but you can also just, in a very basic way, learn a lot about culture and history and nature and American culture over the past century or whatever. And one of the things I see as a big problem in terms of blog culture and in terms of social media, but also just in terms of the way we get information now, is that it seems like everyone sort of develops a very shallow understanding of lots of things rather than having a deep understanding of a few things. And, I think online journalism really feels to me like it contributes to that, in the sense that, instead of reading a 3,000-word piece that gets into the nuts and bolts of something happening, let's say, in American politics or in global affairs, it's like you read a 500-word piece, you got the talking points, you sort of can spout them back, but a deeper understanding. And I think the thing, especially about the internet, is any way of contextualizing this information seems to get really lost. And it's the same with social media. I think it gives us these very false ideas about who other people are that we know. And I feel like that's something I'm really interested in my work in this way. In Flatscreen, I was very interested in the way that this character, the problem was that his models for relationships were all from romantic comedies, and he just didn't really understand how people behaved in actual life. And his models for sex were all sort of, some perfect song playing, everyone just very smiley, and it lasting 15 seconds before they both have a simultaneous orgasm. And so I think there's this way that pop culture has made people feel really inadequate and unsatisfied with their own lives, because they can just never sort of live up to these images we're constantly being bombarded with, because we'll never be as good looking as the people on TV, and we'll never resolve our problems at the end of every half hour in a neat and satisfying way, and we'll never have as much drama or excitement or sexy wealth and all these things. And so I feel like the more TV you watch, the more people just must feel so inadequate, and the more pop culture they take. And I feel like with Facebook, it's kind of even worse, because at least with television and movies, you know that these aren't real people. And you can sort of say to yourself, oh, these are made up lives, and obviously my life can't be like this. But then when you get social media, it's still false. The presentations of people are still false, but it's confusing because they're actual people. And so you look at someone's Facebook pictures and you're like, oh, that person's so much happier than me. Look, they're smiling in all these pictures. And they seem to just be on vacation all the time. All their pictures are on a beach. And so I think it fucks with people. I think people think oh, my life must be so terrible. It's because people are so conscious of the identity that they're representing. And then there's some people who are totally unfiltered, and you think they're really unhappy, maybe. It's such a strange phenomenon. Because I think our public selves are always, to some degree, a performance or a construction, but it's so much more calculated on social media. Like, when you're just in person talking to someone, it's much harder to sit down and think, well, what thing should I say right now that'll get the most likes? You know what I mean? What should I say in this conversation that, like, would get the other person to have the equivalent of pushing a like button? Someone says something and you have to respond. You can't spend, like, 8 hours thinking about what you're going to say next. And I think there are a lot of people who really like that about the internet. Like, I know some people who are so much more charming on social media.
Yeah.
Or funnier. You know, they can sit there and really put some time into it.
But you have a persona.
I just assume no one's paying any attention. And, you know, aside from just, like, making sure I don't put things on social media that might get me fired from some of the places that I teach, I don't... Like, that's the only consideration I tend to have. Otherwise, I just sort of try to have fun, I think. I don't know, some people... I'm sure some people would totally disagree with this, but I find that social media seems like a very shallow place to discuss anything remotely sort of serious, because if I'm gonna, like, say something serious about something serious, I'd rather sit and think about it for a while and write something sort of measured and well thought out than just sort of, like, shove a voice into some... I find that sort of most online debate becomes very reductive very quickly. And that it also becomes essentially a place for people to get other people to agree with you in a satisfying way. I don't know. And to sort of make teams and then feel happy about being on a team or something. There seems to be this sort of deep disconnect between liking something on the internet and actually engaging with it. And, you know, I do the same thing. It's like you see someone got a good review, you click like, but you don't read the review necessarily. I mean, I think it's probably in some ways was harder for writers, like in the 70s. Let's say you publish a book and just, you didn't have a place for people to tell you that they liked that it exists. You just have no idea that they even know about it. And now there are all so many little publications and everyone gets their Google alerts and you're like, oh, someone somewhere said something about me. It's like, oh, I guess my book does exist. Because I, you know, in the same way that I don't believe anyone has anything to say along, I know that there have been some copies that have been sold, but I don't believe those objects, like, live in bookstores or people's homes unless I actually see them. I find that very hard to... Because I have very little evidence of it.